Let us examine the curse that Noah placed on the son of Ham. We will first examine the nature of the offense. What exactly was the offense that Ham committed against his father Noah, and why did it evoke such a curse? Secondly, we will examine the nature and fruition of the curse. Why was the curse directed at Ham's younger son Canaan, and what does this reveal about the God of Israel and the descendants of Ham? Thirdly, what can we learn today from this biblical account regarding Ham's choice and the consequences of his actions in direct relation to the God of Israel? So let us go back in time, when things were a lot less complex and the way of living was not as complicated. It was simple, and in its simplicity and quietness, man heard the voice of the Eternal One. Those who listened and reverenced him as the king and ruler over all the earth walked with him as he taught and shared with them the secrets and the wisdom of life. It is by respecting his rule and honoring these laws of nature and spirit that he established, by which a man comes into the presence of this great king. And those who rebel shall walk in the darkness of deception, subject to the fate of the condemned. There was a man named Noah, whom the Eternal One declared as righteous. The ancient scriptures state that Noah found favor in the eyes of the Eternal One because he was righteous, a keeper of the law. The original Hebrew word is tzaddik, meaning specifically just, lawful, righteous in deeds, not just belief alone. And because of this, he walked with the Eternal One with a perfect, pure heart. As the story goes, Noah's life was spared, he and his family, but all of the inhabitants of the earth suffered a horrible fate due to their rebellion and lack of reverence towards the Creator. Men, women, and children were destroyed. This moment in history has become known as the Great Flood. The scriptures tells us that Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted in a vineyard, and he drank of the wine, and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his 2 brethren without. Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon their shoulders, and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. The scriptures note that Ham saw his father's nakedness. The original Hebrew word is ra'ah, meaning to see, as in to behold or to observe carefully. It is the idea of taking the time to perceive with a special effort of the senses or the mind, to gaze intently upon. It speaks of a focused attention, and in doing so, opening the doorway of your heart, one's spirit. In Genesis 12, it speaks of Pharaoh and the princes beholding the beauty of Sarah, Abraham's wife. They wanted her. The scriptures read, Ham ra'ah erva av. That is to say, Ham beheld the nakedness of his father. Nakedness as in nudity, in the sense of undefended exposure. This is not the same as sexually implicit behavior, as defined by the law. For it is written within the law, the man that lieth with his father's wife hath uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. It is considered a wicked thing. None of you shall approach to any that is near of kin to him, to uncover his nakedness. I am the Eternal One. Ham did not approach his father and uncover his nakedness, nor did he attempt to interact with him in such a way, for this by law is punishable by death. The scriptures simply and clearly state that instead of shielding his eyes from the nakedness of his father in accordance with the law, he focused his attention and his gaze upon the undefended exposure of his father. The offense was in the careful observance of his father's nakedness. This is confirmed when we read that his brothers, Shem and Japheth, took careful measure to shield their eyes. The scriptures state, they saw not their father's nakedness, and thereby they were not guilty. The curse itself reveals the severity of such an offense. In truth, we do not know what was in Ham's heart as he observed his father. However, we do know that had he interacted with his father in a sexual way, he would have been put to death instantly. For this is the fulfillment of the law. He was not put to death. He was rendered a different kind of judgment altogether, which fell upon the head of his younger son, Canaan. And Noah awoke from his wine, and knew what his younger son had done unto him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. This speaks of bondage, a slave of slaves, and not just physical bondage, but inner turmoil of the spirit. Bondage, spiritual bondage from generation to generation. It speaks to the bondage of the mind. The chains of the soul. In careful observance of the Scriptures, we see the repercussions Ham's offense had upon the heads of his descendants. The land of Canaan was taken numerous times in plunder and death, a land promised to the Israelites. As we look across the span of history, the descendants of Ham reintroduced evil into the land. We read about Sodom and Gomorrah, the land which represented sexual impurity and blasphemy. King Nimrod, ruler of Babel, representing rebellion and defiance of the authority of the Almighty One. And from that, Ashur, who built the wicked city of Nineveh, full of idolatry and almost every evil under the sun. And throughout the Scriptures we see that the battles in which the Canaanites were involved, the hand of the Eternal One moved against them, allowing them to be slain and overtaken throughout time repeatedly, left in ruins, left in bondage, and not just physically, but mentally, a spiritual bondage to rebellion, perverted sex, oppression, bondage to evil. In the original Hebrew, the word Canaan means humiliated. The descendants of Canaan, suffering endless generational loss of pride, dignity, and self-respect. There are those who count the observance of nudity as a small matter, because in our modern society, the body is no longer sacred, but reduced to be an object to satisfy base, animal-like desires. It is no longer viewed as a sacred temple to be respected and honored, but one to be put on display for base gratification to the dishonor, harm, and detriment to men, women, and even children. Ham's one act of sin, his focused attention and observation of his father's nakedness, has led to the result of physical and spiritual bondage, corruption among his descendants, slaves to mental torment, addictions, sexual perversion, violence, and oppression. In modern America, approximately 1 out of every 2 Americans profess to be Christians in some form or another. According to educational resources, 40 million American people regularly visit porn sites. 35% of all internet downloads are related to pornography. 70% of Christian youth pastors report that they've had at least one teen come to them for help in dealing with pornography in the past 12 months. 68% of church-going men and over 50% of pastors view pornography on a regular basis. Of young Christian adults 18 to 24 years old, 76% actively searched for pornography. 59% of pastors said that married men seek their help for pornography use. 87% of Christian women have watched pornography. 55% of married men and 25% of married women say they watch pornography at least once a month. 57% of pastors say pornography addiction is the most damaging issue in their congregation. 69% say pornography has adversely impacted the church. The Eternal One has declared that to commit such acts of sexual perversion brings about confusion and death, not only upon the individual committing the acts, but upon the heads of their descendants. Confusion of the mind, We observe now in modern times the disorientation of the mind among the masses as they lie in perplexity regarding their sexual orientation, bringing a whole new meaning to gender confusion. This is the judgment of the God of Israel. This one offense of not guarding the eyes from what is deemed evil in the eyes of the Creator has reaped a countless array of wickedness and suffering that not only rests upon the head of the offender, but upon his descendants. Canaan suffered because of his father's sin. It is written, "The God of Israel visits the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and the children's children unto the third and fourth generation." It is the reckless, wicked man who boldly continues in his folly, with disregard for those who came before him and those who will pay the cost thereafter. There is no pain equal to the suffering of the soul, leaving an emptiness, a void that only the Eternal One can mend. Guard your heart. I say to you, guard your eyes, shield them from that which is evil, for surely you will give an account one way or another to the one who gave them to you. Honor thy Maker.